Today's webinar. Hello.
Hello, Teddy, we can't hear you.
Okay. Today's webinar would be delivered by Mr. Alan Askari. I'll just say a few words about him and then I'll invite him to join us. I think we're trying to sort out a connection issue with him. So Alan is a senior clinical fellow in bariatric surgery in the East of England deanery. He actually completed his undergraduate and foundation years in Manchester and went on to undertake his core surgical training, during which period he obtained an MSc in surgical sciences and practice from the University of Oxford, followed by a PhD from the Imperial College of London, before undertaking higher surgical training. Alan is really keen on medical education and surgical academia. He's had about 120 peer-reviewed papers, book chapters, and has presented over 150 abstracts at various international conferences. He's currently the chair of the Surgical Trainees in East of England Research Collaborative, as well as the National Bariatric Surgery Registry Trainee Representative. He is the immediate past president of the ASGBI Moinan Academy and the past ACID Council ASGBI representative, and he's the current Row Group social media lead. He has developed over 30 national and international educational webinars and is really passionate about mentoring medical education and clinically relevant academia. I've worked with him for the last year, and he's an excellent mentor, someone who's really keen on improving the people around him and making sure that everybody around the team he works with grows. It is an honor and a pleasure to welcome Mr. Alan Askari today to our platform. So without much ado, Alan, I would hand over to you now.
Well, thank you very much for that very kind introduction, and my sincere apologies that we're running a little bit late. I just got back home from a conference, bariatric conference in South London, and the trains were what you expect in London. So thank you very much. My name is Alan Askari. I've spoken to you before. One of the feedbacks from previous talks were that it was all a little bit too quick in my presentations. It's always difficult to try to convey everything that we can in one session in under an hour, but I'll try my best to slow down. One thing I would say to you, everyone, is that please do remember that these sessions are recorded. So it would be probably more fruitful and more beneficial and productive if you were to listen to the presentation rather than take notes, and then you can come back at a time of your own leisure to look at the slides again. And I'm happy to share these slides with anyone that is interested. And as I said, there's a recording. Okay, so first of all, I assume everyone can hear me and see my slides.
Yeah, Alan, can hear you.
Fantastic.
Yeah, hello, I can hear you now.
Thank you very much. Well, and thank you for taking up the time to tune in on a Friday evening. Well, it's late towards late night for you. But I just want to talk about how to write a paper. And essentially what we're going to cover is some of the myths around writing, the format for writing a medical scientific paper, what makes a good paper, and how we can optimize our chances of getting a paper published, and what the pitfalls are with the do's and don'ts. So by the end of the presentation, if you understand that writing is actually a learned skill, it's not something you're born with and isn't something you should fear or assume that some people have it and some people don't. Anyone can write a medical paper. It's just a case of training and skill, which can be developed over time. We should be able to write a coherent and good quality paper and appreciate the steps in the writing process, as well as setting yourself up for success to get your paper published. So let's start off with some myths. There are a lot of myths, and certainly I believed a lot of these when I first started writing papers some 10 years ago, over 10 years ago now. And writing papers, one of the myths, the key myths I come across now, even with some of the trainees that come and ask for help, is that writing paper is hard. It takes a long time. I'm not really good at it. It's something for somebody else, or you have to be a very good native English speaker to write a good scientific paper. These are all absolutely not true. Some of the best papers that I've seen written in very high impact journals have been from non-native English speakers. And the other myth is that a good article requires complicated writing. I mean, it must make things really complicated to make ourselves sound like we're experts. And that's really not the case. And in fact, writing in simple language is usually better. The other kind of myth that we've come across, and that's pervasive, unfortunately, is that high impact journals are the only ones that really publish well-written papers. For myself, some of the highest citations I've had have actually been in journals that have been impact factor 2 and 3, not very high at all. In comparison to papers I've written in the Annals of Surgery or BMJ or British or Gastroenterology, which have actually had fewer citations. So I hope I can dispel some of these myths as we go on. Okay, so what's the format for writing a paper? Well, one of my all-time heroes is Richard Feynman. Richard Feynman was a nuclear physicist who worked with Einstein, and he was an American scientist. And he always used to say, if you can't explain something to a first-year student, then you haven't really understood it. And I really firmly believe that. And Richard Feynman was not only exceptional in his in the field of physics, but he was also an exceptional teacher. So writing a manuscript is really about good storytelling and sharing in knowledge in the clearest and most concise way, and your findings to the audience. It's not about bamboozling your readers or your audience with lots of facts or lots of technical jargon, and it's not really about a manuscript that's difficult to understand. So how do we write a manuscript? Well, first of all, you need to have a template. And blank pages, I mean, even now, after over 120, 130 papers later, and over a decade later, I never write on an empty template. I never write an empty manuscript or Word document. It's very demoralizing. And I will share a template with you, and you can make your own as well. But it's important that you use subheadings to break down the important parts of your paper. It's important that you clarify the message that you're trying to convey. And you want to write in bursts. What I mean by that is there'll be some days where you write quite a lot and some days not so much. What's important is that you maintain that momentum over the next few weeks or months. And you have to accept that there's more than one draft necessary, especially when you're working with multiple people when you start out. It is always going to be more than one draft. So the idea that you sit down and write from a blank piece of paper all the way to the end is unlikely. And you just have to accept that. May I please kindly request that all those who aren't contributing actively currently to just mute, just so that the audience can have a better audible experience. Okay, so how do I do it? Manuscript Cookbook, as it were, the format. And again, I'm more than happy to share this. I'll email this to Theo as a Word document that I've copied and pasted here that you can see. Well, because essentially what you want to do in your first draft is write a manuscript that is almost ready to go out. You want to make it as easy as possible for your collaborators and your senior authors to edit without doing much work. So it starts off with the title of manuscript and a kind of author page and any conflicts of interest you may or may not have. Then we may move on to the abstract, and then introduction, methods, results, and discussion, references, and tables and figures. Don't worry about writing all of this down, honestly. Not only is it recorded, but we'll go through each one separately. Okay, so first page. The first page should really be your author affiliations. And you can see that this is a template that I use now, whereby I have left all these blank, because it's a blank template, and you can, and there are empty lines next to the bullet points. You want to write down what the corresponding author is, the name and email, and you want to write down the author titles. What I mean by that is your degrees, your colleagues' degrees, etc. You also want a page, most journals do nowadays, about, you want a paragraph or a few lines about conflicts of interest and the funding you may or may not have received. You also want to state what the author contribution was. Like what did each author do? You can write their full names, you can write their initials. Essentially, you want to demonstrate that every author on that manuscript has played a role in writing and completing that project. Okay, so paragraph 1 should be your abstract. It should only be really one paragraph, and the abstract should convey introduction, methods, results, and conclusion. Write it last. Write the paper and then write the abstract. It's a lot easier that way. It's a lot quicker. It's a lot more concise. Check your word count. Check with the journals what word counts they are willing to accept. And every journal has an author guideline. Now, most journals will say about 200 to 300 words. There are exceptions, of course, but most of them are in that ballpark figure. So if you're finding that your abstract is like 1,000 words, that's just not. You're losing time there. You're writing an abstract for a journal that's simply not going to accept 1,000-word abstract. Be concise. Convey only the key information that you want to convey in the abstract. Give the reader a good overview, enough to make them read the entire paper, like think like a Hollywood movie trailer. It makes you it gives you a flavor of the topic and makes you want to see the movie, but it doesn't tell you everything that's happened in there. And that's what you want to do, really. Introduction should be 2 to 3 paragraphs. And as you can see there in top right, I've written that your opening paragraph should be about the health or condition or situation that you are investigating. So, for example, if I'm writing about bariatric surgery, I will talk about gastric bypass or gastric sleeve or cancer surgery or whatever it is in a very broad terms. For example, bariatric surgery is very much in the forefront, and it's obesity is one of the most serious health conditions facing us, etc. Your paragraph 2 should be a brief background about what others have reported an issue, but you don't want to go into too much detail because you want to save something for the discussion as well. You just want to say roughly other authors have reported that this is the findings. However, in paragraph 3, you want to say why you want to investigate this. Why is your research important? Why should people read your paper? Why should this be published? And it's important to justify your work. The last line of every introduction should be the main objectives or the primary objective of this meta-analysis, randomized control trial, observational study, whatever it is you're doing is ... It is whatever your aim is. Your methods should be about 2 to 3 paragraphs. And it's usually the easiest of the sections to write, if I'm honest. Ultimately, all you're doing is explaining how you did your project, not what you found. It's important we don't confuse that, because I review a lot of papers for a lot of journals, including some high impact journals, and you'd be amazed the number of people that write their results in the method section. That sounds somewhat ridiculous, but they do. You want to talk about how you collect data, what data you collected, what equipment you used, if any, what surgical technique or medical technique that you used, what the inclusion and exclusion criteria were. So, for example, were you looking mainly at adults, at children, at males, at females, at age ranges of a certain specific range, 18 to 50-year-olds, for example, premenopausal, postmenopausal, whatever, mention that. Mention any funding you've had. If you've had any. If you haven't, just mention you've had no funding. And also, there are some studies, such as meta-analyses and systematic reviews or randomized control trials, that is better if you register them on a free website, which I'll talk a little bit about later on. Use a checklist, because most journals, when you submit your paper, most reviewers will use a certain checklist that's validated. And I've given a whole bunch there. So, for example, the STROBE, which is a strengthening reporting in observational studies in epidemiology, it's a checklist for observational studies. Use them while you're writing your paper, because it tells you if you've done all the right things and ticked all the boxes. And so on, Moose for observational studies, Prisma, Consort, and Prospero. Now, of course, you're not going to use all of these in a single article. You'll have to tailor make them to what is and what is not appropriate to your particular study. Checklists. Now, there's one paper that came out recently that told you essentially how to write like a pro and publish like a boss, which was quite comical and quite refreshing to see. but it's a very already a highly cited paper, and this will be one of the this will be extremely highly cited paper, I'm sure. It laid out a very clear and nice way in how to write a paper. And on that paper, which you can see the link there, it's a freely available, by the way. You don't need any particular login or anything. You can just download it straight from PubMed. That tells you step by step what you should use. And certainly one of the things they recommend is some of the things we've already talked about in terms of using checklists to write your paper, so that when you submit to a journal, you've ticked all their boxes. Your results should be about 3 to 4 paragraphs, should explain your findings, use subheadings when you need to. The first paragraph of your results should be the main demographic. So you're setting the scene, you're explaining what your population was. We had a total of 78 patients underwent this procedure or had this diagnosis or that diagnosis. You want to give a flavor of the age ranges, the gender, the comorbidities, and the general demographics. How many smoked, didn't smoke, how many had a primary operation or secondary operation, a redo operation, if you like, how many were on certain tablets and how many were on others, etc. The second paragraph should concentrate on your key findings. So what you want to report here is your objective facts. You don't want to give any opinion. You don't want to say why something was or why you think something was the way you found it. That's for the discussion, really. You want to just state 36% had a recurrence of cancer, 23% had this, whatever the figures are. Please do make sure that you write the tables or the figures that you're referring to in brackets. Again, you'll be amazed the number of people who will submit a paper who will have tables and figures, but there's absolutely no reference or only sparse reference in the results. So if you say males had a higher rate of smoking or a higher rate of cancer, you could, in bracket, at the end of it, put in brackets table 1, table 2, figure 1, whatever it is. Do not just write out everything you have in the table or figure. It really annoys the editors. It really annoys, and it's superfluous. It's not required. It's not concise. It's not good writing. What you want to do is summarize that table or figure for the audience, so that if they want to dig deeper and look at those tables and the figures, they can just go straight to it at the end of the document. Do not give, as we mentioned before, do not give an opinion on results. That's for the discussion, really. You can speculate on why you got the results you got and other people got the same or different later. And in the results section, you are purely reporting what you found. I hope that's clear, and I hope you can still hear me. Theo, can you all still hear me? Okay, I'll assume you can. I didn't get a response from the team, but I hope you can. Okay, now the discussion. The discussion is probably the most important section of your paper. It is the key bit that usually makes or breaks the deal in terms of whether it's going to be accepted or not. Again, when you first write a discussion, you just think, oh God, I've got to write this discussion. I've got to write, a couple of hundred words, or a few hundred words, or 1,000 words, or whatever. It's very demoralizing. So I break it down. So 3 of the paragraphs are essentially written for you. The first paragraph is going to be a summary of what you found, not what other people did. What were your main findings in your study? The last paragraph, which is paragraph 8, is a summary of the paper and conclusion, and the summary of how this has contributed to the literature. How it's essentially your findings in the context of a wider published literature. The one before that, which is paragraph 7, is the main limitations of your current study. So those 3, 1, 7, and 8, are essentially going to be written almost for you, if you like, because they're going to be very template driven, very kind of logical, very formulaic. Now, paragraph 2 to 6, so that's the middle chunk of your discussion. This is the main key bits. The main discussion is going to focus around the points you want to discuss. Now, that will change from paper to paper, topic to topic, specialty to specialty. It's about what you want to talk about. Now, before writing any of these things, especially paragraph 2 to 6, I'll make bullet points. So I'll make 4 or 5 bullet points and say, okay, I want to talk about cancer recurrence. I want to talk about the drivers that influence that. Is it staging? Is it patient reporting late? Is it patients who have had a certain type of surgery, laparoscopic versus open, etc.? And that's the key bit. You want to write those paragraphs in bullet point format first, and then you can write around them. It makes it a lot easier. This discussion, the section that we talked about, it does not need to be, in fact, it should not be written in one go. What you will find is if you try and write it in one sitting, one afternoon, and one day, you'll find that you will come back to it later on and have to delete a whole bunch of stuff. It's not very productive. So I would concentrate on certain paragraphs and structure it around each one and work in bursts so that you're writing at a consistent level, but you're not trying to write in one go. Plagiarism, I just want to talk a little bit about plagiarism. Plagiarism is essentially copying what you've written before or what others have written in similar or exact words. It is taken very seriously. Please don't do it. You cannot even copy what you have written before. Now, you may think, well, hang on a second, those were my words, and I presented an abstract at a conference, so I'm just going to copy and paste this, or I had a thesis, master's or PhD or whatever, and I'm going to just copy and paste it. Please don't do it. Journals use web tools, which are AI-driven, which will detect if you are copying your own work or that of others. Use a plagiarism tool, and you've got a free one there that will show you if your writing is too close to what you've written before or what others have written. And as we said, do not copy and paste from other articles. So what makes a good manuscript? Well, a good manuscript should really be topical. It should be engaging, it should be clearly written, it should have a good structure. And we talked about a template, and that's why I use it, because it gives you a good structure as a good first draft. It should use simple language to convey a message. You're speaking to a learned readership, you're speaking to medical professionals in your field or wider field who are likely to understand the terms. But if you can convey the message in a simple English, simple written language, and I apologize, it is usually English, rightly or wrongly, and certainly I'm not my English is not a native language for me either, like many of you may not be. But ultimately, whether we like it or not, whether we think it's a good thing or not, there is a standard language, and that is English in academia, irrespective of what subspecialty you are writing in. And it's important that you write in a simple language, check your grammar, check your spelling, and accept and mention the limitations of your study. No study is perfect, none. Even the best studies that are written in Nature, Lancet, New England Journal, whatever big journal you want to quote, they are always going to have strengths and deficiencies. And it's important that you highlight that, because it shows that you have insight. It shows that you have a balanced approach and a scientific approach and a critical thinking in the way you look at science. How do we optimize our chances of getting a paper published? Well, first of all, you need to work from a single document. So I cannot stress this enough, and it's something I wish I'd done more of, because it has led to untold suffering on my part when in my early years when I was writing. You email a colleague your draft, he or she emails it back, then there's 3 or 4 other collaborators, they all email and work on different versions. Before you know it, you have 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 different versions. I think my world record was 22 versions of the same document, and I cannot tell you how much suffering that was to try and put it together without it contradicting itself. So what I recommend you use Dropbox or Google Document, or something that you can all share in the cloud, and you can track the changes so that your fellow collaborators can just put changes directly onto the document. And please do encourage them to, so that they can, he or she can make the changes directly into the document. It reduces your time, it reduces the number of duplicates, and it speeds the whole process up. Target specific journals and readership. Now, you must remember and understand that there are certain journals that are targeted at certain audiences. So, for example, if you want to talk about a pediatric issue in pediatric medicine, there is no good way, there's no good reason to send it to a very purely surgical journal. As good as your paper might be, it's not really something that is of great interest to that particular journal. It may not be appropriate. Please do read the authorship guidelines for specific journals. They are wildly, wildly variable. And this is very regrettable because you'll find that every journal has their own way of doing things. It can be very confusing, and I often despair as to why there's such a wide variety. But unfortunately, things are the way they are. They're the rules, and we have to kind of go by them. Please format your tables and figures, your fonts. It's specific to the journal specification, and that's where the authorship guidelines comes in. Make sure you're using the same font, the same kind of size font. I know it sounds very pedantic and a little bit kind of almost silly to state, but this is looked at. You make sure that all your tables are in the same format. If you use the color, like gray lines to break up the rows of a table, use the gray lines. You don't use gray in one and blue in another, Arial font in one, Cambria or Garamond or whatever, Helvetica in another. Do not do references manually. This is going to be hours of work if you do it manually. It is excruciating. Every journal, as we said, not only has their own style of tables and fonts and formats, they also have their own styles of formatting references. And using a software like Mendeley, where you can change it, what you can do is when you insert the references, and there are very good videos on mendeley.com. By the way, this is completely free. You can use other software which you can pay for, but I still use Mendeley because it's free, it's easy to use. There's a video on their website that shows you exactly how to do it. It can there's a bar that it can embed into Word document that you can just write, whether using Mac or PC, Microsoft kind of versions of computers. Please accept that there's a longer turnaround than you may anticipate. It takes a long time for journals to turn things around. Some are quicker than others. And again, they're very, very variable, regrettably. The longest I've had to wait for a turnaround is about 2 years, 26 months, in fact, to be completely accurate, which is just, bewildering. And unfortunately, you'd have thought during COVID, with people staying at home and having more time on their hands, turnaround would be quicker, but it's actually seemed to have slowed it down somehow. When you get your when you submit a manuscript and it's gone under the peer review process and the reviewers have sent it back to you, please answer the reviewer comments directly, point by point, highlight it. So one thing I like to do is I write in blue. I say, thank you very much for the comments. This is what the changes we've made. Emanuela, you have your hand up. You're more than welcome to go ahead. Manuela Tagoy, I apologize for the pronunciation of your name if that's incorrect. You have your hand up? No? Okay, we'll move on. Emanuela, can you hear me? Okay, I thought it was a question.
Emanuela, you can unmute, okay?
Alan, I think it was in response to when you asked if we could hear you.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, if there are any questions, then please jump in. And there will be time for questions at the end, I promise. Okay, be resilient. Okay, in your clinical, academic life, in life in general, it's important that you are resilient. A rejected paper does not necessarily mean it's a bad manuscript. For example, I have published in a journal that was impacted 3.5, and I've had 500 citations from it. That's not me showing off. That's just me just saying that, and that was rejected 4 times from other more higher impact journals. That's not me. That's not me trying to demonstrate that how brilliant I am. It's quite the opposite. It just shows that you need to stick at it and just accept that certain papers, certain journals are looking for certain papers of a certain flavor and not others. Pitfalls, what are the do's and don'ts? Okay, so we'll just talk a little bit briefly about this. Please do set the manuscript out in a certain format that the journal asks for. Now, you can write it in a very generic format and then tailor make it to that particular journal. Work consistently. Now, what I mean by that is you may think, well, this is a contradiction to what he said earlier. He said, don't write it all in one go. And now he's telling me to work consistently. What I mean by that is, yes, don't write in one go because it's not easy. You probably don't have enough time with family, with clinical work, with everything else that's happening in your life. But equally, what tends to happen in a lot of papers and papers that don't get finished, or manuscripts that don't get finished, is that they will write a few paragraphs in November, which is this month, and then the next few paragraphs they write will be in February, and then a few in May, and then it just drags on. People lose interest. It becomes increasingly more difficult to maintain that momentum. Please do check errors, spelling mistakes, tables, and references. If you have, for example, said 33% of patients had this, your table should reflect that. If there's a contradiction, you need to kind of you need to resolve that because it looks really bad. It looks like a shoddy work, and that person, that writer, has not fully written the manuscript in a format that is accurate. Be realistic as to which journals you can submit to. We would all, myself included, would absolutely love to publish every single project and paper that we do in Nature. I wish it was the case, but yes, be optimistic. Yes, be forward thinking. Yes, be keen, but equally realize that certain journals are more suited to your paper than others, and that takes a bit of time and experience. And a rejection from paper shouldn't lead you to believe that your paper is no good. It really isn't the case. Don't lose momentum. We've talked about this, especially when you're working with multiple collaborators or different sites, different hospitals, multinational projects. It can become very difficult to track people down. Keep on it. Yes, don't write it in one go, but equally have a time frame, a timeline in your mind as to when you're going to be finishing your first, second, third draft and submitting to a journal. Don't become disheartened by rejection. So I hope it doesn't. I'll share a little story with you very briefly. I'm lucky enough to have published quite well in literature, but I've had some really big rejections. One of my manuscripts was rejected 18 times. That's my record, 18 times. So I sent it to 18 separate journals, and the 19th one accepted it. On hindsight, that was a long time ago now, actually, but more than 7 years ago. And on hindsight, I didn't really target the journals intelligently. You sent it to the biggest impact papers, journals, and it wasn't really journals that were interested in this kind of work. How do you know if a journal is interested in that kind of work? Well, it's usually worth scouting journals, see what they've published recently in the last few years. If they have published a systematic review meta-analysis that's very close to your work, it's unlikely they're going to want to publish it again next month. So just make sure that you are selecting the journals carefully. Plagiarism, we've already spoken about. Please do not do it. It has certainly UK here. This is a reportable offense. It may be very different in Ghana, but I don't know. But it's bad practice. It will be detected. Copy and pasting other people's work or even from your thesis or so on, word for word, is a very, very bad idea. And in the UK, it actually has really severe penalties. You can even be reported to the national body, to the General Medical Council. And unfortunately, I know of colleagues who have actually come to real trouble through doing that, through plagiarism, and it's affected not only their academic careers, but their clinical one. I'm not saying that to scare you, to put you off writing, but please make sure that you are writing, even if it's your own work that you published in a thesis previously or an abstract, please make sure that you're writing it in a novel format. So I'm going to stop talking now. So thank you very much. That's my Twitter handle is Alan_Askari, and that's my email there. And I'm more than happy to be contacted by any of you. I'm aware that you've all got your own mentors. So my aim is not to overstep that boundary, but rather to lend a helping hand in any way that I can. So I would thank you for any questions you may have, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alan. Excellent presentation. anyone who has any questions at all, you can either unmute and ask the question, or you can type it in the comment section, and we would pick it up. So Alan, there's a question. It says, if you had a large body of data and you're trying to write multiple papers from it, how do you not plagiarize a section like demographics? Points being demographics remains the same for a certain body of data. And to add to this, Alan, would that be considered as salami slicing?
Yeah, so first of all, that's an excellent question. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Isaac. So ultimately, you can use the same data set to publish multiple projects from. You can. And what you talked about is salami slicing is when you're talking about the same project, but you are kind of thinly slicing it. So, for example, you are saying that you've got a big data set from 2012 to 2022, and then you write up 5 years and submit it, and then you do another 5 years. I'd recommend you don't do that. If you have a large body of data and you're trying to do multiple projects, you need to word it differently, and you need to focus. And the focus of the demographics and results and tables would be different. For example, you may have a big data set on, I don't know, colorectal cancer or diabetes, hypertension. And on one of the papers, you may use a section of data to concentrate on recurrence of cancer or the number of medications patients were on, or how their hypertension was resolved or controlled. And the other one might be on something different, like, for example, chemotherapy, the agents that you use, or another factor with respect to hypertension, such as patient's follow-up, patient loss to follow-up, patient engagement, etc. That wouldn't be considered plagiarism as long as you're not copying and pasting. So plagiarism isn't using the same data for different purposes. Plagiarism is using the same data for the same purpose and wording it the same way. That would be what you don't want to do. And salami slicing, like you said, is about what you want to avoid is salami slicing, where you're using the same data set, but you're just chopping up into different bits. And you want to avoid that. But yes, you can use the same data, and you can, if you word it differently and you focus on the different objectives and different outcomes, then yes, perfectly permissible.
Okay, thank you. There's a question about if you could differentiate between the expansion of the results section and paragraph 2 to 3 of the discussion.
Excellent. Another very, very good question. So in your results, you're going to mention what your findings were, as we discussed. So the first paragraph in your results is essentially saying a total of 130 patients were included in the study. 23% were female, etc. Mean or median age was 28 or whatever, and the range. And you give and so many had heart disease, so many had diabetes, etc., etc. Your discussion, your first paragraph of your discussion is to summarize your findings. And I always find with the main or the key finding of this study, whatever the study is, whether it's a meta-analysis or control trial or observational study, is the following, is that certain staplers are better than others in terms of bariatrics, or certain cancer treatments are better than others. How do you make sure that you're not repetitive? Well, the paragraph 2 to 6 really isn't about your work. It's about what others have found. So that's when you go on to say that we found that, first of all, for example, minimally invasive esophageal cancer surgery is associated with better or worse outcomes. And so et al. In 2017 also found similar outcomes, or found completely different outcomes. But they found that actually open surgery is better. So paragraph 2 and 6 is not really about your results. It's about what's published in literature around your results. Now you can refer back to your results, say we found this, but so-and-so found this. That's fine. But ultimately, the discussion part of 2 to 6 in your paragraphs is about what's published in the literature.
Hello, Alan. A follow-up question to that. So, can you say that for, let's say the paragraph 2 to 6 of the discussion could be on separate, maybe secondary endpoints or primary endpoints of your results?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, you would say the primary objective was that you demonstrated the difference between this group and that group in terms of hypertension, cancer, whatever it is. The paragraph 2 and 6 could be your secondary objective or the key issues around your primary objective. For example, certain papers have found this because this is what they looked at, or you want to, and this is why the bullet pointing and the writing bullet points about the key issues is really important. So you may say your primary objective is this, but there are other factors in play, like cost effectiveness, quality of life, the impact of smoking on cancer outcomes, or whatever those 4 or 5 bullet points may be. And they will be different from project to project. And that's where reading the literature and getting a feel, an idea for what the key talking points, what the key issues around that particular topic are, is important, because then you could use the literature to talk around them. So-and-so find this, but so-and-so refuted this by this, etc. A recent meta-analysis found that they're both wrong, or they're both right, whatever. So your 2 to 6 is a combination of paragraphs. You're trying to discuss the key issues around that topic, whether it's primary or secondary.
Okay. There's a question here. Was there an exact criteria for which your paper got rejected many times? And did you have to make any changes to it?
Yeah, another excellent question. There are many reasons for rejection, and I'm going to speak a little bit broadly about why certain papers get rejected, and then more specifically to that particular one that was 18 times that got rejected, which is very much etched into my memory. Generally, papers can get rejected because by any journal because they are inappropriate for that journal. That's one of the most key topic reasons why the editor rejects it before he or she even sends it out to a review process. So, for example, if you're discussing hypertension in, essential hypertension in young adults, for example, there's no point sending it to a gynecological journal or a journal that's specific in a particular technique or particular branch. That's one thing, choosing a journal. The second thing is the other causes for rejection are it's just not the kind of topic that the journal wants to publish or thinks is interesting to the readership. You got to remember that a lot of these journals there is a commercial driver behind it, so they have to make those publications and articles relevant to their readers and something that readers are interested in. Otherwise, they will lose readers and they'll lose subscription. The other reason why it can get rejected is because they simply thought there were too many gaps in either the data or in the way it was done. And sometimes you can't help that. The data you collected, there's some information that the reviewer may ask for that you simply cannot give, or that you all take too much time, or that you don't think is appropriate to your study. Do I have to make changes to it? Oh, absolutely. After every review, I take on board what they've said. Do I change? If a paper gets rejected and the reviewer says, I'm rejecting it because of this and that, do I completely follow everything he or she has said? Not always, if I'm honest, because some of the comments that are made are not necessarily appropriate, or some reviewers may have missed the point. The thing to remember is reviewers are human beings just like the rest of us. Some of them are better than others, and the quality of reviewers is very variable. So I'm not saying ignore them completely, but equally, I'm not saying, change your entire manuscript on the basis of one comment. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think that does justice to it. There's a follow-up question on the initial question asking about if you could use a large body of data for several manuscripts. So the person is asking for a section like age range, gender, marital status, etc. Those would remain the same in the other subsequent manuscripts.
the figures are the figures. So the percentages may remain exactly the same. That's not plagiarism, but the way you write it, maybe. So if you use the exact same words in the exact same sequence so for example, you have a big data set and you're going to do 2 or 3 projects from it or multiple projects from it. Now, those different projects should ideally, even though you're using the same data source, same source of information, should ideally be looking at different things. Otherwise, it's not a different project. If it's looking at different things, then your focus may be different. But yeah, I accept the demographics may be the same. You know, you've got a population of about 500 patients, still 250 or 300 of them may still be female. And that's fine, you can say that. But you can't use the exact same sequence of words in the same location as you did before. So you have to be a little bit creative in terms of writing it in a different way so that you are conveying the exact same proportion and percentages, but you're not writing it word for word the same way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Any other questions? If you have a question, you can unmute and then ask. Okay. Alan, thank you very much. This was an excellent presentation. Someone just commented, good and succinct presentation. Thank you very much. And thank you for being available anytime we ask you to give us a presentation. It's really an honor for us, and we don't take it lightly. Thank you very much.
It's my absolute pleasure and honor. Thank you, Theo, and thank you for the great work you do. I'm sorry that we started a little bit late, and I hope we've given enough time for all of the key points that you wanted to go over. Final thing I would say is, please don't overthink this. Don't think that this is really exceptionally difficult and you need specialist training to do this. A lot of it is experience. A lot of it is about reading good kind of papers and getting a good feel for what it is. Just get started writing and break it down to those bullet points, and I will send you my template. You feel free to discard it or use it however way you want. You can make your own, but breaking a paper down into sections, breaking it down to bullet points. So when you come to the discussion, paragraph 2 and 6, for example, are really key paragraphs. The first thing I do is I just write, okay, so my paper is about, gastric cancer. What are the key topics I want to talk about specifically around gastric cancer, and who has mentioned points that agree with my findings and who has mentioned points that disagree? What are the key topics? Is it cost effectiveness? Is it minimally invasive surgery? Is it length of stay, recurrence, chemotherapy? There's dozens of different points. It's all about what is pertinent, what is relevant to your study. So write those bullet points out, and you'll find that once you write those bullet points, actually writing a discussion becomes a lot easier. It's very difficult writing on a blank piece of paper on a blank canvas. You need a foundation. And so the first time I come to write a discussion or any part of the paper, I don't actually write anything. I just jot down bullet points. And when I come back to it, I write around each bullet point. And before I know it, I have a paper, I have a draft. Now, it is important that you get other people, your collaborators, and sometimes even non-medical people to try and read the paper. Okay, they may not understand the ins and outs of the exact science behind it because they don't have the background knowledge, but they can tell you if it reads well. And that's actually a very important part of it, because a lot of papers are rejected just because they simply don't make sense. They may make sense to you, but they don't make sense to the readership. So yeah, the key take-home messages here are write in bursts, write around bullet points, have your key ideas thrown onto a page and then come back to it and write. You may discard some changes, some of the bullet points. You may add on other bullet points. Get your collaborators involved to read and reread and redraft. Accept that you'll be redrafting several times. Accept that certain journals will reject your paper. It doesn't mean your paper is exceptional or terrible. It just may not be appropriate for that journal. And just make sure you maintain the momentum. That's the key thing, because one of the key reasons for why people never finish a project especially in writing, is because what they do is they write a couple of paragraphs today, don't do anything for another month, and then it becomes increasingly more demoralizing. Avoid that.
Thank you, Alan. These are really great tips. I remember you sharing the concept of templates with me a few months back, and it's revolutionized a lot of things for me. Thank you very much. A lot of people are messaging me to ask about the recording. The recording will be uploaded on our YouTube channel, and it's free. You can access it. It's similar for all the other webinars we've had in the past. They are all on YouTube. You can get access to that. Our next topic would be with Dorcas. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes. So thank you everyone, and thank you, Alan. I actually feel like I can write like 3 papers tonight before I sleep.
You can, I promise you can. If I can do it, any of you can. You can. It's not. There's no magic to it. I promise you.
Yes.
Don't overthink it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the points you've made. And guys, Alan said we should maintain the momentum. Please don't lose the momentum. I've had a recent experience with that, and it's quite painful to come back after a month and struggling to write up something. So thank you everyone for making it up. It's quite late, and we are really grateful for coming to have a good time and learning some things. Also, we have our next webinar on the 5th of December. We have actually 2 outstanding webinars. We are trying to get them done at least before the Christmas. So the next one will be on the 5th of December, and it will be on how to prepare an abstract for presentation at a conference, which will be by Mr. Tom Brick. I hope all of you are part of it. And have a lovely evening.
All right. Thank you all very much. Thank you for coming, and see you on the 5th of December. Thank you, Alan, once again. It's an absolute honor.
Thank you very much. And anybody wants to contact me, you have my email. More than happy to be contacted by anyone. I may not get back to you straight away in theatre and clinical work and so on, but I will do my very best to get back to you in 1 to 2 days. But yeah, happy to help in any way, and keep up the good work, guys. Well done for tuning in on a late Friday evening, and I wish you the best and a happy weekend.
All right. Thank you. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.